Today is the 6th day of November 2014, and we are back with our dear friend Dr. Alok Pandey to speak today on the soul of India. What a marvelous subject.
Actually, this subject leaves me speechless in wonder. There are three things which, very personally to me, I am speaking for myself right
Yes.
now, they leave me speechless. One is when I contemplate on India and its wonders. The second is when I think about Savitri. And the third, of course, is the beauty, grace, love, and the wonder of the Divine Mother. These are things which, how much ever we may speak on these issues, these subjects, we can never exhaust them. Some time back, I had this interesting thought, which I had thought about penning down, and I have not yet, maybe some time.
Mhm.
This was after my visit to Australia, because that completed a journey to the 5 continents. And the thought that came to my mind was why I still love India. So, it's an amazing land. It's not a land, actually, it's like Alice in Wonderland, it's in itself a phenomena. And the closest way I can understand it is just as Aurobindo once spoke about the ashram as being a laboratory. So India is a grand old laboratory chosen by the divine for a certain kind of evolutionary experiment. Now when we look at it as a laboratory which is evolving, going through many layers, then we can understand at one level the unpredictability about India. It's a very unpredictable country at one level. And at another level, it's a very stable country containing all the desiderata of the past held within, making it a amazingly complex, many-sided, fascinating. I don't prefer to use the word country, but we have to use it for, want of any other word. I would rather say an amazing goddess, an amazing mother.
And a motherland.
Motherland.
And very few countries have motherland.
Motherland. And when we look at Aurobindo's work also, if we take 3 types of work, he did many things, and someday we should speak about Aurobindo and the mother's gift to the world. Many people don't understand. They just feel, there is an ashram and some people are engaged in an inner sadhana. Yes, and okay, he wrote some books. They don't realize the kind of gifts that Mother and Aurobindo have given to the world, much more than the so-called building up of free hospitals and distributing blankets and, so many things. So if we look at one of the 3 very interesting works that Aurobindo did, among many others, and all 3 come from the root mother. So the first was awakening the consciousness of the Shakti, the mother element in India. So we see that around 1905 when Bengal split and there was a movement and Aurobindo used it. He said it's a very good thing which has happened, not because it should have happened, it shouldn't have happened. But how even things which are seemingly bad, adverse, unwanted, can become a catalyst for a great change. And actually that was the point of trigger when all India came together as one unit. It's amazing that one split brings unity. That's how God works. And what was the mantra to create that unity which Aurobindo used was Vande Mataram. Of course, the Vande Mataram mantra, as he said, has been given by, we all know, by Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay in his now famous book Anand Math. But this mantra which was lying dormant in some ideative field of the nation, suddenly came to the forefront. And of course, Sri Aurobindo charged it with his new sense and spiritual sense, and the spirit he infused into it, and the whole country woke up. Subsequently, many instruments came, and that's a different part altogether. But this aspect of India as mother is something which is amazing, and he awakened that Shakti within India, within the people who inhabit it, and along with the awakening of this Shakti came a legitimate pride, a legitimate sense of self-respect, a wish for freedom, and so on and so on. The second thing which he does, again connected to the mother, is when he comes to Pondicherry and places the Divine Mother in the forefront of the quest. Now, if we look at the entire parable of avatars and the stories of spiritual evolution, generally we will see that it is the Purusha element which is in the forefront. The feminine element is there. In all great traditions it is there, but subordinated. It's a subdued energy. It's a kind of a background hue, not the prominent color in the forefront. But like many things, Sri Aurobindo has revolutionized, and someday we'll speak about that even in terms of yoga. One of the things was to put in the forefront the Shakti which stands behind Shiva, which stands behind creation, which stands behind everyone who has ever accomplished anything worthwhile, whether spiritual or otherwise. And he brought in the forefront the Shakti, the Divine Mother, and placed her in our midst, that now the yoga has to take this particular route. And when he was doing it, he was not just doing it for the ashram. Sometimes I feel a bit, of course it amuses me also when I read the mother of the Sri Aurobindo ashram. Of course she is mother of the Sri Aurobindo ashram, but she is much, much more. And the ashram itself is just a small little something in her vast embrace. And so that's where I feel that he gave to the whole practice of yoga this new dynamic turn. Yoga was not just now for a passive inward orientation, which is one aspect of yoga, an important aspect no doubt, but a power which could reshape our life, remold our destinies of individuals and nations and groups. So he gave a totally new orientation of yoga. Yoga leaning on the Purusha aspect, on the divine as a passive inner presence, changed into a yoga which became very dynamic, and that we see down the line now. All the new yoga movements which came up after that have been very, very dynamic. People speak about life and yoga and how yoga can engage with every aspect of human life, which was not there earlier. Yogis were supposed to be cut off and aloof from the world. But this has come. Whether people like it or not, right or wrong, the different elements that come in, that's a different aspect. And finally, what Sri Aurobindo did, and there again we see the mother, that not all are fortunate, I would say, and privileged to have such a wide opening to her with a spirit of self-giving. And for them he placed in the hands of the world Savitri. So here again we see the energy, the Shakti, the consciousness of the mother embodied in a body of sound word, symbol. So when we look at India as Shakti, as a power which has which has provided space, I would say that the beauty of, very often when we talk about earth in general and then we come to India, earth is portrayed as a goddess in Indian thought. And she's a strange goddess because gods are supposed to reside in heaven. They are supposed to be high up. But earth is a goddess which has chosen to take a plunge into the dense layers and cover herself with all kinds of obscurity, denseness, suffer the inertia, suffer the error and ignorance and everything. And there are so many beautiful lines on earth. Again, we see Sri Aurobindo placing the earth where it should be, not an escape from earth, but a change of earth. Exactly. Earth is a goddess who aspires to the divine. And there's so many prayers. Even today I was reading this prayer of the mother where she speaks this experience, where she sees that her physical body is seized and goes through layer and layer and finally unites with the divine. And Aurobindo says it's an original Vedic experience where the earth principle unites with the divine. And he says it's a Vedic experience which many of the new Veda scholars would not agree. So the possibility of earth uniting with the divine, for which earth chose to clothe herself into a, this kind of an obscure robe. And perhaps that's why the divine loves her so much. I mean, it's amazing that the divine doesn't choose to, descend into heaven, or because heaven for him would be a descent or other areas, but he chooses to come to earth, and not once but several times. And while I'm sure this has happened all over the world, I for one believe that the truth has manifested in several areas in the world. But the beauty of India is that India has preserved this memory in its atmosphere and in the mind of the race.
And of all the nations, divinely sanctioned.
Divinely sanctioned. And that's why the immense complexity. Now, when we look at the complexity, we see two types of complexity, and that's why people are baffled. The first complexity is, if we look at the historical India, from a hoary past, it still has in its traditions the stories which go before, the coming of Pralaya, and, how many times divine incarnations have taken place, the Vedas, the Upanishads, and beyond it. And all this is preserved in the Indian thought as something active and alive. It is not something which is, okay, it's a scripture which is dead. Never. It has always been there as a living tradition. There are people who have not only believed in it, they've given their life to it. So it has always remained dynamic. At the same time, even though it contains those layers right from a hoary past, which has been there in other places also, as the mother says, just as in India we had the Vedic age, there was Shalya where there were equal efforts. And she says there is a tradition more anterior to the Vedas and the Chaldean. That also she says. But these have been wiped out largely from the memory of the race. But India has preserved these traditions. So at one level you see that, but we also see that all these traditions, that's one of the beauty of India, has always been open to modification and evolutionary growth. And that's how, I look at the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Gita, the Tantra, Puranas, and now Aurobindo's Yoga. So there is one line of thought which regards the Vedas as, well, the ultimate, and all else that comes is a, outflowing from the Veda, in the sense, of course it's an outflowing, but in the sense that the highest is the Veda, and whatever comes later on is something which is subordinate, secondary. But there is another way to look at it. The Vedas lay the foundation of all the great truths of existence. And they had a path, they had an approach, their quest was for immortality, and they went through the zigzag of the gods. One god, it's like a relay race, who helps them to go to a point, another god, and so on and so forth. It's a long, long journey. Now what the Upanishads did, it took the essence of the Vedas, but took a different route. It completely discarded this approach through the gods, and it took a straight route. It said, no, within your heart. And recently I've been translating this Mundak Upanishad. Amazing. It says from the heart you can approach directly and enter into that shelf, the Brahman. And it says very clearly that there are the gods and the path of the gods. And there is this direct approach which man can have. So they brought in something new, basing on the Vedas. And this is something beautiful about the India, that in each age it reinvents itself. Unlike, even the Vedas are not the last scripture, in the sense it is not a scripture which is written and finished. The Vedas will be rewritten even in the future. And that opens, an amazing aspect of India, which is often goes unrecognized, because there are the strongholds of tradition, the Shankaracharyas, etc. And they believe that no, just the right pronunciation, the right diction, and those slokas of the Veda, they are the end. No, the Vedas are only the foundation.
It's almost like those who adhere to the Bible.
Yes, absolutely. There is a whole way of looking at Indian tradition, which I feel is not healthy. It's odious. It'll, become too antic. It won't be able to keep pace with the living aspect of India. Because within India, there is this evolutionary element. And this is not just a thought. Look at, Saint Kabir. He's regarded by everybody as a great saint. So when in one of his, he has written many couplets and look, such amazing poetry. So at one place he speaks about the Vedas in this way, just to put it in the Hindi for the flavor, and then I'll tell you in the English. So he's saying what really is Veda and what is, holy places. So he says, Jo bolun so Ved kahava, jahan pag dharu so tirath. So he says, whatever I speak is a Veda. Wherever I step is a holy place. Look at the consciousness. Yes. And Aurobindo reveals it in one of his aphorisms that the Vedas are sacred, not because God spoke it, but because the soul heard it. Look at the beauty. So where is the end of the soul's hearing of the marvel and mystery of the divine, which is infinite? He is infinite. Which book? The Vedas are a document of earth. They are there embedded. And he says that also, that the eternal Veda lies secret in the heart of every creature and unfolds itself. So there is a Veda which we regard as a book, written and finished, like the Bible, like the Quran. Mm-hmm. But there is a Veda which is unfolding itself all over this world. Wherever there is a human being looking inside his soul and waiting eagerly to hear a word of God, there the Veda is being written. Yeah. It is in so many languages. There is no one scripture, there is no one language. And when we understand the Vedas from that point of view, that though they touch the bedrock, they sowed in the mind of the race the possibility of the future, and they were like seed thoughts, seed ideas. They were not finished products. That's where the mistake goes. It is a seed. And I suppose every great personality, divine being who has come, has sown a seed. Whether it be the yoga of Muhammad or the yoga of Christ, they sowed a wonderful seed in the heart and mind of humanity, or the yoga of Buddha or the yoga of Krishna. But now it is up to us. We allow this seed to flower, or we just put this seed in a nice little box and just worship it. Now that's where the problem comes. So, and yet that has also helped to preserve the seed for somebody else tomorrow to use it for one's progress. So in India, this has been always allowed. Then after the Upanishads, which drew from the Veda yet went beyond it. In fact, some of the Upanishads say openly that, well, there is a Vedic way of going about life and, going towards an ascent. But there is a still higher way, because it will lead you only up to a point. Of course, they are talking about the ritualistic interpretation of the Vedas. Mm-hmm. That's how the Vedas began to degenerate into mere, as Aurobindo says, karma kanda, where people were just lighting a fire outside and putting, God knows, a lot of ghee and everything into it, and forgetting the real sense. And the Upanishads had to come in to rescue. Then again we see that after the Upanishads comes the age of the Gita. Again, these Upanishads, with their insistence on discovering the Brahman, the one, the real, the unique, the alone, at some level, post-Upanishadic period, humanity began to think, oh, that alone is, and this is not. Whereas repeatedly, an Upanishad as powerful as the Mundak says, that is this, that is this, that is this. But they forgot it. So they began to become otherworldly. So Gita comes with a strong message of the path of karma, picking up from the Upanishads the essence, but applying it in a much vaster field. No Upanishadic Rishi, though he talks about it in principle, could actually say in a warlike situation that this too is divine. Adore. Now, this is where I find the beauty of India, that its spirituality was not born and finished on the first day. It grew. And then we see the tradition of the Tantras where something else comes. And Aurobindo says the Gita was the first synthesis, the Vedas were a synthesis. Then came the synthesis of the Gita and then the Tantra, which brings in an aspect which in the Gita is implicit, but it stays behind. Like one of the implicit things is Paraprakriti Jiva Bhuta, the Shakti, Paraprakriti, the higher nature has become the Jiva. So that's how we are all children of the Divine Mother in our deepest sense, not just because we talk about it, but that's the truth of everybody. In the Puranas, this aspect is brought to the forefront, particularly in the Tantras. It's worship of the mother and the mother, the Shakti aspect and the many forms of Shakti, and even Shiva, even the great gods become subservient to her. She becomes the path and she integrates this world and all its processes on one side and the supreme vision which the Upanishads and the Gita spoke about. So we see another level of synthesis. And yet something is missing. And that something is that all these various approaches which India has nurtured, and each of them flourished. The beauty of India is that sometimes it's amazing that these diverse approaches have flourished together because the bedrock of the Vedas permitted it. You have to relive the truth. So this is a very interesting place which of course I'll be visiting again this time on 12th December. It's called Ujjain. Ujjain is a place in India where many of these traditions come together. You have, for instance, Mahakal temple, the temple dedicated to Shiva, which contains one of the Jyotirlingas of Shiva. Now each of these stories is amazing. No, I'm resisting the temptation to get into these stories.
I don't mind.
Well, yeah, let's see.
But
just the overview.
Yes.
So there is this aspect of Shiva and the Jyotirlingas, where in a certain sense Shiva manifests upon earth in a form of matter, but yet this is a matter charged with a special vibration. This aspect of divine becoming matter is there in many aspects of Indian stories. There is another story where Vishnu becomes matter, Shaligram, which is worshipped in Indian tradition. So this divine becoming matter is an amazing, amazing truth, which we have forgotten. Of course, earth itself, the way earth is worshipped in the Vedas, and she would go and cry to the Supreme. These are amazing stories. But coming to this place and the confluence, it also contains a Shakti Peeth, which is a place where Sati, when Shiva's consort dies, maybe this story I'll partly touch upon. It's a very interesting story. Sati is the daughter of Daksh. Daksh is one of the Prajapatis, one of those powers which mother has used the word formations, who have been given charge of maintaining this world. They have made certain laws and rules by which the world should be governed. Now, Sati is a daughter of Daksh. He has other daughters also, one of them is Shati. Now, she falls in love with Shiva. Now, Daksh has made one rule in his kingdom. He says you will worship, do yagna, everything, but Shiva is not welcome. Now, why Shiva is not welcome? That's a different aspect altogether. But now, Sati, of all the things, one day goes beyond a certain limit which the father has set. It's a very symbolic story, that don't go beyond it.
Yes.
Why? Because he knows Shiva's kingdom starts there. Yeah. And one day she loses way and reaches a place where some people are meditating upon Shiva. And he's a very interesting character, Sage Dadichi. He's, offers his bones. It's a story about transformation, first touch about that. So, when she goes there, she asks the sage that, look, I'm lost. Tell me the way. And he says something very amazing. He says when, sometimes to be lost on the path is to find the path. We live within frames and we think it's the path. That's how we all start our journey. We make a set of rules, everything, which are necessary at a certain stage. But as we grow further and further, gates begin to crash, the boundaries begin to become wider and wider, till we discover that great truth which the mother speaks of in prayers, that while contemplating upon the ideal attitude which will help people to come closer to you, I could not conceive of a rule which was vast and supple enough. She starts by saying all rules have vanished. And then she says we all should make some rules for ourselves. But they should not become fixed and rigid. They should be at each stage different, as we grow. They should not become artificial. That's something again with Indian thought, and that's why people find it very difficult to understand that on the one side in this land there is so much emphasis on brahmacharya, continence. And on the other side you also have Ajanta and Ellora. You also have the Sun Temple of Konark, where you see on the top such amazing picture of sages who are meditating, and down below in the same temple you have seemingly erotic sculpture. Now these are facts of India, and people often wonder that what country is this? You have the Vedas, the Upanishads, and you also have Vatsyayan's Kam Sutra, which is, he's a sage who has dispassionately observed the most, supposed to be the most carnal of acts, the sexual act. And again, not from a moralistic standpoint. The whole edifice of brahmacharya is on a much deeper standpoint. But, just to talk about Shiva and Sati. So Sati is in love with Shiva. Sati is the power of truth which has to remain circumscribed within the boundaries of social norms, religious rules, etc., etc. But she falls in love with Shiva, who is eternal, who is beyond rules, who is infinite. The story of our own life. But they meet and they part. They meet and they part. They meet and they part. Sati is not ready, and a time comes when Sati is caught between Prajapati, a father. Prajapati is the old consciousness, and Shiva, the freedom of the infinite. And she makes a wrong choice, so to say. But she discovers it subsequently that, well, I should have chosen to be with Shiva. And she throws herself into the fire. Now Shiva comes, there is massacre, and he beheads Prajapati. That's such a governance which doesn't allow the souls to go into the beyond. And then there are people who come and, pray to Shiva that please, he's after all one of the formature, there will be chaos. This story should be the quotes, by the way, in his earlier writings. So they bring in the Hari, a goat's head. And the divine physicians, Ashwini Kumars, they suture the goat's head in a hurry-burry, maybe without proper anesthesia and without proper operation theatre. They stitch the head in such a way that the head is stitched, the face is toward the hind side. These are very symbolic stories, like Moses, where God shows the hind side, not the front side.
Or Janus, that has different faces.
Yeah, that's right. So now when Daksha moves forward, he moves backward. And when he moves backward, he moves forward. Now this is interesting. Something, which concerns with our traditional way of looking at India and another way. Traditional way which is rigid and, we have to get rid of that. So it is there in the story itself. So Shiva then goes with the body of Sati and moves along the quarters. And he is besieged with grief. What is the grief of Shiva? Amazing. How can Shiva have grief? The only grief that the divine experiences is the grief of the soul, which was born to be free and had to end up with such a tragic end. This is the grief of the divine. That's what, that's why he drinks the poison. That's why we see Aurobindo and the mother. There is a story, 1947 riots, when Mool Shankar was stabbed,
Yes,
you must have heard this.
Of course.
And he was stabbed and he died, 47. He was a ashram inmate. For 3 days, Aurobindo, to everybody's visible looked so serious. This is the only thing which makes the divine. When people asked Aurobindo that, why does mother look serious? He said, no, she's not serious. Then, the person insisted. He says, maybe when she has to come down and take upon herself the grief, the burden of the disciples. So Shiva takes all that upon himself. And when Vishnu sees this not not good, so he destroys the body of Sati in 54 parts. And now the places where these parts fall is an amazing story. But first, to complete the story, then Shiva goes into trance after that, and Sati is reborn as the daughter of Himalayas as Parvati. Now she purifies her nature, goes beyond the limitations of the old consciousness, and becomes the perfect mate for Shiva. So nature purified, uplifted the mountain tops, and the Lord of nature coming together becomes Shiva and Parvati. The old nature is not ready, so it has to be destroyed. Now these parts of Sati, which are 54, and from that the holy figure 108 comes. 108 comes also from many other stories. But it falls on places within India. If you really look at it, it defines the geography of India. Similarly, every Indian, when he was, in earlier days, would pour a glass of water or a mug of water on the head. There were no showers. Still, there are many places there are no showers, or even if there are showers, the water doesn't come, like I experience every day in my house. So, but he was supposed to recite a sloka naming the 7 rivers, Ganga, right down to from Sindhu to Kaveri. Again, the rivers which unite India. Now, the beauty of Indian culture has been that it has at once integrated the outer and the inner. These are the rivers which define the geography, or the parts of Sati which define the region, but they are also truths of inner life. We have to reconstitute with these parts. They are like divine documents. And Aurobindo uses this line in Savitri. We have to reconstitute the perfect word.
Yes.
Now these are like divine documents scattered all over the world, because within India a kind of miniature world exists. All the prototypes, all the representatives from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, from Gujarat and Rajasthan right up to the northeast, all types are there. And that's why people wonder. They also say, no, the Europeans have been there. And somebody was telling me, in fact, Vladimir, when I went to Russia, that there was a kind of passage between India and Russia both ways. And I won't be surprised. People came from Iran, from Greece, from Europe, and they integrated with Indian culture. So within India, there is a miniature world, perfect place for the divine experiment. Now, in this place, Ujjain, you have the Shaivites, you have the Shakti Peeth, you also have Sandipani's ashram where Sri Krishna, he was educated. You also have the dark Tantra, and you have actually a Bhairav temple where people offer alcohol to the deity. Can you imagine that? That even alcohol is being offered. Everything is being offered. They offer meat and alcohol. And many people receive it as prasad. Of course, I didn't like the energy of the place at all, because it is a place where you invoke the deity in all its darkness. And there too you see the Divine Mother. And that place invariably will have some cobras who will be fed and all that. Creepy place. But you can see that it is an energy which deep inside, if you go, you will find that essence of the divine. That's what Tantra of the left hand side was. And Aurobindo has used the word a bold attempt.
Yes.
It failed because there was no purity. It's a very dangerous attempt. And now the best part is, Ujjain also has Aurobindo's relics. So you see this ability to bring in diverse strands of evolutionary efforts. That's why the Bible becomes a scripture of India. You see, it's interesting that the Hindus who have been, now Hindus not by a denomination, but those who have been the mainlanders at some point of time, they have no issues. They regard Bible as a scripture and Christ as very much a God. And as a child, I can tell you, it's not after reading Aurobindo, it's obvious. But even as a child, in my home, 25th of December was celebrated as what mother has subsequently said, Bon Noel. So it was basically Bada Din, the day of light. It used to be celebrated in a special way. And we used to go and greet, Christian friends and all these people. It was never an issue. Not even an issue that we are different when we are tolerating. This concept doesn't come.
And the shopkeepers who have the
Absolutely.
Pictures of all the gods.
Absolutely. There is no issue. And even at some point, even with the Muslims, which is the most difficult to integrate, there was no issue, and a typical Hindu has no issues, or people who have been nourished by the soul of India, I would rather say, regardless of Hindu, Muslim, or, which gives something external, have no issues about going to, let's say, the Gondolin temple of the Sikhs, or, Bodh Gaya of the Buddha, and they will feel the sense of divinity there. They will go on Eid and, greet a Muslim and feel the sense of divinity. They will not feel, oh, they are different, and I am doing it just out of courtesy. No, it's not there. It's not inbuilt. A typical Indian is not programmed for that. Of course, lot of distortions have come. Lot of issues, lot of efforts of the dark forces, particularly see Kashmir, which was another land where Shaiva, Tantra, Vedanta, Shakti, that, all these have flourished. And also it seems, as, some stories say, that Christ and Moses came there. Now, I wouldn't be surprised. Now, is Sufism the one possibility of Islam's reformation?
Yes.
All these were there, and that's why it has been attacked. And they have done a lot of damage. The one possibility for Islam to change itself was through the Sufism, which again we see that came all the way persecuted from Persia. Where did it find shelter?
Yeah.
Where does it still thrive? It is India.
Yes.
Not even in Pakistan. I was surprised. There is this famous singer, Nusrat Fateh Ali. You may have heard about his name. He has sung a lot of Sufi songs. To start with, these Sufis could not sing openly because, they would be persecuted. Now, when he died, he is a world famous, he's a real celebrity. Amazing singer. Many of his Sufi songs are simply amazing. One of them is Amir Khusro's, one of my favorites, where the singer takes the form of a lady, the mystic, and says, "Chhap tilak sab chini mose naina milai ke." So just as a woman says that, I have adorned myself with all my jewelry and my best attire to meet you, my beloved, but you took away everything just by looking into my eyes. But it applies as much to the soul. We cover ourselves with very good looking, virtuous, pious, holy, and the divine plucks away. The story of the gopis, Sri Aurobindo speaks of that, when the divine plucked my robe of sin, I let it go. But when he plucked at the robe of virtue, I held to it very dearly. So he has sung this famous couplet by Amir Khusro, another, Muslim Sufi mystic. Chhap tilak sab chini, mose naina milai ke. Now, this man, when he died, because many people may join, so an order was passed that no, his whole funeral and burial has to be done very, very quietly and, discreetly, without many people knowing about it. Can you imagine? And, he talked about Allah, he talked about Islam, the Sufi songs refer to Allah very openly. They also refer to Krishna, but that's very few songs. So this kind of a thing in India, but in India, it's a very common sight. I have so many friends who are typically born Hindu who just love, I am one of them who love Sufi songs. And when they talk about Allah, it's such a, as if I am taking a wine of the divine. So it's because it's programmed like that, and here all these things coexist. So it makes the country very, very complex.
It's interesting that America, the melting pot,
another
of
melting
so many
pot.
cultures, another melting pot. But could you talk a bit about Mother's map of India?
Yes. There is so much, and maybe we'll have to probably.
Maybe we need a second
I just, as I said, I'm speechless.
I'll make a note of it.
I'm speechless about when it comes to India. We have not yet touched the fringe.
No.
And since you spoke about the map of India, so at least this is what I tell people, and I feel there is a certain truth in it because it has come from my very depths. That if you want to know India, don't go to the metros at all. Don't go to Bombay, Delhi and Chennai. You'll see another metropolis, but unfortunately much worse. don't even go to the villages where you will meet something of that India, but something like a broken temple which is in ruins, and as Aurobindo said, where still there is some service to the eternal. If somebody can catch it, they may catch it, but mostly one will say, oh, what kind of a place. But two things one must do. Go to the Himalayas. No need to meet any Babaji or any cave or Lama or nothing. Just to go through the Himalayas. And the second is, read the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, particularly the Mahabharata. And if one has done these two things, see, Mahabharata is a very secular scripture, though the Gita is part of it. But it's, unlike the Ramayana, is much more focused on the story of the divine descent. But Mahabharata is the story of a civilization, and it's reenacted. That's why it's called as Itihas. It's history. In India, history's notion was very different. Now, when you look at the Mahabharata and you look at the Himalayas, you will see the boundary of India. See, so Mother brought out this truth which is there in the Mahabharata. Now, where did actually Gandhari, the famous wife who blindfolded herself, wife of Dhritarashtra, come from? She came from Gandhar, which is modern Kandahar in Afghanistan. She comes from there and gets integrated into Aryavarta. So thus far the kingdom was extending. They were following the same path, the Aryan path. And it was originally called as Aryavarta, where people were following the Aryan way of life, which was not a racial type but a psychological type. And Aurobindo has made it very clear in his note on the Arya, when somebody asked, why have you called it Arya? The term which was totally distorted by Hitler and given a totally different meaning, just like Superman and such things.
Nietzsche, yeah.
And then if you see in the Mahabharata, right up to Manipur and beyond, Arjuna travels all the way and marries, a famous princess who is a warrior princess, and Aurobindo has written a whole beautiful long poem, Ulupi, on this, and it's a must read. It's about that lady and her love. She loves Arjuna, Arjuna loves her, and they have a child. And then, she knows that this man will be stifled if he lives here. She wants to. She loves. Who wouldn't? But she sets him free. She says, you are born for great deeds. Travel where these heroic deeds call you and befit you. It's an amazing story of sacrifice of a woman, of her heart's desire for the sake of a greater good. Amazing story. Down south you have in the same story the Shalva kingdom, mother kingdom, down south. And all these stories come together in Mahabharata, all this whole map. Similarly, when you see the Mahabharata at the Himalaya, running right from top, and Kalidas speaks about it, and Aurobindo has translated it beautifully. And when I read this part of the translation where he speaks of Himalaya, I think of Aurobindo himself. He says that sitting majestically upon the throne of earth, with one hand dipping in this ocean and the other in that ocean. And I just think of Aurobindo sitting on the sofa majestically like the Himalayas. So if you look at really the reason why she put all these right up to there, up to the Burmese borders, the Himalayan ranges stretch. It's a special land. You see, even physically the Himalayas came into existence because the whole mass broke free from, if you look at Africa, and actually they have that Rift Valley where the drift took place, it broke away, and then it integrated with what is now China, and then the mountains came up. Now, I won't be surprised if this land mass was the one which was the seat of the Lemurian kings, and even the, those days when, because Aurobindo has written a poem called Rishi, which describes the ice age, and we know that there have been ice ages and there have been drift of land masses. So this India is not just a fanciful map she has drawn. What she has drawn is a land mass which carries within its material substance the energy and the memory of great events. So they are bound to come together. It is a common endowment. You can't separate. It is something which has gone through a common experience. You may separate it artificially, like people from households get separated. But are they ever separated? You may travel far and wide, but still there is a touch of joy when you remember your mother. However she may be, there is something which is there in the heart, even towards a mother who may have been very cruel. Still there is something which connects, however far you may travel. So this landmass has been not just as we see it now, but a landmass which has preserved these memories and a common psychological and spiritual experience, and all that is concentrated in the Himalaya. This is what I feel, it is concentrated in the Himalayas, and one is just travel across.
I see.
I mean, I've been very fortunate to travel to all the different sites of Himalaya, and each place you will see a different contour. If you go towards, the northwestern borders, you will see barren, rugged. Almost one thinks about Buddhist nirvana. And in fact, both Mahayana and Hinayana Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhism and Tantra, Buddhist Tantra has flourished there. It is like that. Whereas if you go right down to the extreme east, you will see those beautiful hills. You almost fall in love. You don't feel that they are like nature which is just playing with her Lord. That's what you see. And in the middle you have the difficult Himalayas of Garhwal. You have the snow-clad peaks. You have places which have amazing variety of flora and fauna, the herbs and whatnot. And of course, as is the way of India to create a cultural unity, all kinds of stories you will see in different aspects. So India is a land which connected itself through stories. Mother said something very interesting, that India is a land of storytellers. And so true.
Yeah.
We did not create a geographical unity by a map. We created through stories, through a common psychological endeavor called yoga and spiritual, through legends and myths, in which automatically all these things came together. That's how we learned about India. And I think that's where the soul of India, it extends over all this. And when we cut it, like the story of Sati, you cut it and throw it around, still she is one.
Yes.
And that's why there will be this interconnectedness. Of course, how long it will take and what humanity has to go through in the process is a different thing. And sometimes, as he spoke about in Arab-Israel conflict, that brothers who love each other often hate each other.
Yes.
They are passionate in love with each other. And she said that both believe in one God. But the Arabs are very passionate, the Jews are very intellectual, and one believes in a very impersonal God and the other believes in a personal God. So there are a lot of similarities, and because of that there is this fight. So this side with Pakistan, it's because there is such a strong similarity of nature. You cut just a little layer and you see that it's very difficult to recognize if you cut across the boundaries of language. Even language is very similar, but cut across that boundary which have been imposed because of rigidly following a way of life, and you will find it very difficult to feel a difference between people on that side of the border and this side. And so we started with that terrorist statement which you said. They have recognized a truth, but it's shadow. When the Vaga blast took place and the terrorists said, wait, this is not enough, we are coming on to the other side of the border. Well, he's right, because they are one. And the interesting part is they will end up uniting. They will end up uniting. See, this is how evil ultimately serves the grand purpose of the divine. How India and America are beginning to get closer. And how, as I was speaking the other day, America, Russia and India should come close together for a greater work.
Yes.
So something very similar will happen. Terrorists are going to make life miserable for the Pakistanis and the Indians. Indians, they have been making miserable for a long time. And these brothers have to come back together. This will be one way, but unfortunately a very bad way. There is the sunlit path, and there is the path, dark path. But humanity makes a choice. And if you look about Burma and that side with the Angkor Wat and all these people who had been there, it's very evident that that part is nourished by India's spiritual energy. And maybe as a confederation, it will become part of all will become part of one subcontinent. It doesn't matter whether one calls it Indian subcontinent or calls it SAARC. The mother spoke of that now the unity will come as a confederation. And I think this present Prime Minister has taken a step in that direction.
Agreed.
So I think
We've, I think, still
yes,
another talk to do here.
because
We haven't talked about the British in India. We haven't talked about the Cripps proposal.
so many
So
things.
much to do, but
Yes, but the soul of India, which is essentially the great spiritual adventure, which India is about. If you look at India, it's these things don't strike us so much. We forget it. We put it behind as part of the history. Who cares? Greeks came, Britishers came, Mughals came. They stayed on. They became Anglo-Indians, Sufis, Musalman. All this took place. And Indians are fine with it. The Persians, the Parsis.
oh yes,
But the difference is Parsis mixed so well. There is a story about the Persian king who came to India, to Gujarat, and the king said, okay, you can come. India is a land with an open arms. Yeah, but
Yes.
how are you going to stay here? He simply brought glass of milk and mixed salt, sugar into it. And the king understood. He said, yes, stay on. So he said, we will mix like sugar, unseen but enriching. Parsis have done that.
definitely.
They have enriched the Indian society just like Jews did it, in other places. But unfortunately, many of the other traditions which came, they got enriched by contact with India. But except for some, they have not contributed much towards enriching it. Or at least it's not yet recognized. Of course, there are a lot of Muslims who have enriched India like anything. Abdul Kalam, the president, is one such example.
Yes.
And there have been Christians who have really enriched India. Mother Teresa is another example. So it's beautiful that, they get enriched and they enrich. So India is a land like that. So it's a place where spiritual energy is abundant, but you have to cut across the other complexity of India from the surface to the depth. And I use it semi-humorously, maybe a few minutes more.
Sure.
That, just as to understand a human being, you have to get past his outer nature. The color of the skin, the habits, the way he eats and way he walks and the dress he is wearing. Otherwise, we become judgmental and we don't see the soul. So India helps us. It's a place meant for yoga. So the first contact is, oh my God, such dust, heat, I cannot live here. That's what a yogi is meant to do, equanimity. So if you can bear with it, you will get in touch with the soul of India. And if you cannot, then obviously you will carry something of India always. But it will be difficult to integrate, just like in ashram. Wonderful life, but very difficult at times outwardly. And despite the fact that Mother wanted us to live in every way wonderfully, but still, so India provides that space, if I may use the word, for spiritual evolution. The only way you can survive here and be delighted is if you take spiritual evolution as your real goal. Otherwise, always one will be looking here, there, feel unhappy, curse, complain, grumble, try to manipulate systems. But happiness comes and the wonder is revealed when we make spirituality our goal, because India is meant to sustain and nourish it. In the moment you look in that direction, you will see a wealth, an amazing wealth of treasures after treasures. They can never be exhausted.
Thank you, Alok.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.